I'm the executive director. Got it. I'm Michael Walton. I'm the executive director here at Green Spaces. We are Green Spaces is Chattanooga's sustainability nonprofit, and we are here today to learn about how to get the most out of the Inflation Reduction Act. That's not gonna work. So our mission is advancing the sustainability of living, working, and building in Chattanooga and the surrounding region, and we couldn't do it without you. And so all of the work that we do here is thanks to our support. And it's only this community that makes all of this happen. So thank you for coming out. Thank you for supporting what we do. Coming up December 7th, we have probably one of the best green drinks of the year. So Green Drinks is a completely free, completely open networking event, second only to Ruby Falls, I should say. Ruby Falls was definitely the best Green Drinks. But this one's going to be at Chattanooga Brewing Company, just a couple blocks away over by Finley Stadium from 5 to 7 p.m. We're going to be recognizing our volunteers at this Green Drinks, so please come out and join us for that. Also, we have Main Times 24 coming up December 3rd. I know everybody's excited about that. Green Spaces hosts the chili cook-off at Main Times 24. So come out after the parade and have a drink, have some chili, or better yet, sign up for a team and compete with your chili. So if you think you've got a good chili recipe, the fire department has a word to say to you. All right, December Lunch and Learn is going to be about how to reduce waste during the holidays. So this will be a waste reduction focused Lunch and Learn. The Green Prix was a huge success down on the waterfront. We had 26 teams competing, elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools building and racing their own electric cars. We have an example of what an elementary school kit looks like in the back. That one is actually between schools, so we'll be delivering that before the spring race. If you want to get involved in the Green Prix, we could use your help. Your business could sponsor the Green Prix. You could help teams build their cars, or you could help us actually put the event on. So the next race will be somewhere between April and May. Once we get that date ironed out, we will let you know. But please pitch in and help with that if you're so inclined. We are really excited that the city is about to announce the updated climate action plan. We should have the draft of that in the next week or so. And it is based on the integrated community sustainability plan that I know many people in this room helped create. So we will have instructions for how to get involved with that. If you want to come out to council to support it, once it goes to city council, we'll let you know when those dates are. Empower our low cost, no cost energy saving strategies. We offer these classes in low income communities in Chattanooga and across Southeast Tennessee. If you're interested in these, we also have a video library on our website. Green Leader. This is a great way to kick off the new year with a professional certificate from UTC, all about how to be a leader in your organization to help lead environmental and social improvements in your organization. And then once you do that, your business can get a Green Light certification, which is part of a brand new Green Business Directory that we're going to be launching in the first quarter of next year. So we'll be encouraging consumers to use this Green Business Directory to bring their business to the organizations like yours that care about this stuff. Thank you to our founding partners, Compass and Franklin Architects. Thanks to our top members, so BMC Office, Barry and Hunt, Scenic City Solar, New Terra Compost, Grace Frank Group, Modus Build, Rockbridge Venture Law, and Green Strategies. Thanks always to all of our members that support all of this work. Again, we couldn't do it without you. If you want to become a member, talk to me after this. We've got some really exciting new things coming up and new benefits for membership. And now we have Jerome Garciano. Is it Garcia on there? I think that's misspelled. Let me change that real quick.
Yeah,
I
that's
got
okay.
you.
Thanks.
No.
Thanks.
Garciano. There we go. All right. Real time. Okay. So Jerome is do you want me to go through your bio, Jerome, or do you want to do the quick
I can give a quick intro. Like I could skip you, save you the time if you want.
Okay. Well, so I will say on a personal note, so I've known Jerome, gosh, for probably 8 years, 10 years, since I think we met when I was up in Washington, D.C. Jerome for decades has been sending out this compendium of renewable energy and energy efficiency tax incentives from around the country. And he has been my go-to source when I have questions about energy and tax incentives. So I was really excited that he agreed to join us to give us this overview. I've seen a lot of different sort of overviews of Inflation Reduction Act, and I really wanted Jerome to give us a good overview of what we should expect, and an overview of what he does in New York. So Jerome, take it away.
All right, thank you, Michael. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. And can you see my screen now? Not yet.
I cannot. Will you do share screen again?
Yes.
But we can see you now. There we go. Yep. Looks great.
Great. Thank you. So yes, thank you everybody, and appreciate the invitation just to talk with you today. You know, like Michael said, Jerome Garciano. I'm an attorney at Polsinelli, and we have numerous offices. You know, a full service law firm. I sit in the tax credit practice group. I've been doing tax credit finance for real estate and other type of community projects pretty much my whole career. I started off trained as an architect. I moved more toward the real estate and business development side, worked for a developer doing tax credit projects, and now I've been practicing as an attorney for close to 14, 15 years now. Again, all focused in the tax credit project finance space. Most of the projects having some type of public policy goal, public-private partnership approach. We represent a lot of banks and the investors that buy the tax credits, as well as other project finance participants and developers. As Michael said, I've been interested in kind of the green space for a while now. I've been keeping track as part of this tax credit practice of the green incentives, both at the federal level and the state level, for a long time now, maybe 13, 14 years. And this summer, with the Inflation Reduction Act having pretty much now the biggest change in those green incentives and real investment in these climate change, addressing climate change and the environmental piece, the biggest change that we've seen. So really exciting time. Happy to kind of lay out some of the highlights. I will try to save some time at the end for Q&A, but I do have a lot to cover. Generally, I always want to start these presentations, since the passage of the act, that and a very important date to remember is in February next year. We are scheduled to have regulations from the IRS, set up and distributed, and the pages upon pages of the legislation has a lot of good outlining provisions, but there are a lot of questions, and which I'll cover, and a lot of unknowns that everybody is waiting for those regulations to come out in February. And so I guess everything presented today, it has a big caveat in terms of, this is what the statute says, and everybody's waiting for the regs to really flesh out kind of the actual implementation of a lot of this, and some of the open questions that the legislation, didn't fully quite address. So with that, I would want to, let me go to the next slide here. I'll go with a couple different topics today. The first one being the extension and the expansion of the existing incentives. So big picture again, that we had a tax credit regime on the energy tax credits, which I also include covering energy efficiency and other types of clean technologies. And so, one of the big things that the Inflation Reduction Act did was extend and expand those existing incentives. There is also new tax credit programs that were added, and that will cover that in the following section. And then lastly, there are some structural changes that provide a lot of flexibility that I'll cover at the end, as well as some of the bonuses, bonus tax credits that were implemented. So this first slide here is a list of the current, or the historical tax incentives that were extended and now expanded. And I hope everybody appreciates, earlier this summer we were in a regime where the tax credits were, the renewable energy tax credits were being scaled down. They were being stepped down and scheduled really to step down all the way to 10% tax credit. And so, it was a really, big surprise when this came out. And now we're in a situation where there's a lot more investment at the federal level, for these clean energy incentives, where you might be able, if you had all the bonuses and you were in the right locations and the specifics of your project were right, you could possibly get up to 70% of your solar project or your energy project in the form of a paid for or supported in the form of a tax credit. So it was a really big change, big surprise. I didn't think it was going to happen when Build Back Better died, but we have the main credits laid out here, the investment tax credits and the production tax credits, until 2025, where there will be actually a new tax credit regime. It's very similar structure, but technically a new technology neutral credit program. But let me step through quickly these existing and expanded credits. So the ITC, or the investment tax credit, is what we typically think of when we think of like solar tax credits or energy tax credits. So now the new legislation talks about a 6% base tax credit amount. And if the project meets prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements, or is under is generally a smaller project under 1 megawatt, that percent becomes the 30% tax credit. So so most likely most people will either be under 1 megawatt or will attempt to meet the prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements, which I'll talk about in more detail later, to get the 30% credit. So that is the kind of the base level. And on top of that, we have some other bonus credits here. So you see here a domestic content bonus of 10%, a energy community of 10%, and a environmental justice solar and wind of potentially a plus 10% or a plus 20%. Again, I'll talk about the bonus credits a little bit later in the presentation, but that is an important change in the expansion and the extension of this. Some new technologies, also very exciting. Energy storage now is, kind of officially in the legislation part of the ITC, and you can even have a standalone energy storage project that would qualify for ITC. Microgrid controllers, interconnection property that is now again specifically listed as qualifying for investment tax credit. For those of you who do low-income housing, and so I do, my background in tax credits really has primarily my practice in housing tax credits. So the housing tax credit basis does not get reduced now, if there is a solar project or an ITC as part of the capital structure. So that was a big benefit for those involved in affordable housing. The production tax credits. So generally, I think of these credits as the ones that are supporting the big wind farms. Although now, solar projects, now qualify again. I think originally, way back when it was first enacted, a solar project was available, but typically the large wind farms are the ones that access these, the more utility scale. It is a tax credit that is a per kilowatt hour, so the tax credit is based on production over a 10-year period. And so there are similar bonuses and prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements where there is a lower level of tax credits that is available again on a per kilowatt hour amount. But that if there are some of these wage requirements that were met, that there would be a 500% increase, essentially 5x multiplier on the tax credit amount. And again, there are these other bonuses for domestic content and energy community, which I'll cover in a second here. For on the real estate side and the residential side, Section 45L is extended and renewed. So essentially, it's a tax credit for energy efficient, net zero or Energy Star homes. You have basically two thresholds in terms of net zero and then Energy Star, and you have a per unit amount of tax credit available, depending on which level of efficiency you're able to claim. And for multifamily, which a lot of these bigger, very green multifamily projects tap into, is essentially, again, a 5x multiplier if you meet the prevailing wage requirements. So potentially 5,000 per unit for a multifamily if you can get to a net zero or net zero ready certification status. So this credit was definitely expanded, and I think hopefully will be utilized more because it's a more attractive incentive. 179D was also extended and revised, expanded. This is not a tax credit technically, but it's a tax deduction. And so there are, some benefits in terms of losses and being able to take deductions, from your income in terms of your tax liability. So currently now it's set up as a 50 cent per square foot base, and that can go up to $1, as the energy costs of the renovation or the construction, reduces your energy costs by more than 25%. And again, if a project can meet the prevailing wage and the apprenticeship requirement, there's a 5x multiplier. So that 50 cent base goes up to $2.50, and then up to $5 per square foot, which is again a really large increase. This new program has new provisions for retrofit building for existing buildings, and those buildings have to have been placed in service for 5 years before renovating them. My understanding was that the original 179D seemed to fit better with with more new construction, but now I think there's this opportunity for a retrofit plan for existing buildings. Then the standards that they're benchmarking against is the ASHRAE on 90.1, which is similar, and I think they're indexing it to the most latest versions. One big change was in the old program, government buildings and government-owned buildings was able to allocate the deduction to the designer of the property. the new change is that now private nonprofits or tax exempt entities could also allocate the deduction to the designer. So so it expanded from just the government owned buildings to essentially private nonprofit owned buildings. Charging stations, or this is titled alternative fuel vehicle refueling. So essentially, electric vehicle charging stations and other kind of clean fuel charging pumps. It is now a 30% tax credit, and if there are, so in commercial applications, there needs to be a prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirement to be able to get to that 30%. 100,000 maximum for a commercial project, $1,000 for a principal residence. One key change in this program is if you are installing a electric vehicle charging station in a urban area, the urban area must be located in an eligible census tract, which is a term that's really used in the new markets tax credit area. Essentially, a low income census tract that is qualifying for a new markets tax credit program. So, so again, if you're in an urban area, you need to watch out for that to make sure you are in an eligible census tract to be able to access this. Probably most of you have just kept in the news in terms of like changes in the electric vehicle tax credits. So now there's new tax credits for new and used electric and fuel cell vehicles. There's differing amounts based on the battery and the exact specs, and whether it's new or used. There is now a mineral and battery component requirement that those be manufactured or sourced from in North America, and that there was qualified manufacturing requirements for these. One of the big changes is that there are actually income limits and retail price limits on buyers of these. I think that was also in the news as kind of this legislation was being negotiated. But if you are buying an electric vehicle, you need to make sure that you qualify again based on your household income. So if your household income is too high, you might not be able to access the full credit. Again, continuing with more the residential incentives, 25C is back and expanded, 30% tax credit on energy improvements. You got heat pumps, boilers. Here's the maximum amount per year. Also doors and windows, insulation, and just general envelope pieces. Right now, there isn't a qualified manufacturing requirement, but starting in 2025, there will be some type of, I guess, labeling or certification where the products must meet the requirements of the regulations to be able to qualify for the 25C tax credit. And then home energy audits now explicitly an allowable cost for 25C. So lastly, 25D, that's essentially the equivalent of the solar tax credit. So solar, fuel cell, geothermal, 30% credit now. Battery storage also at an allowable cost. So again, for more personal residents and for homes, you'd be looking at 25D for the solar tax credits. So there are a bunch of new programs or relatively new programs that the Inflation Reduction Act created. So I'm just going to go through a few of those. The first two are essentially the equivalent of the existing programs, but technically, as I mentioned earlier, they are technology neutral, and they are basically based on greenhouse gas emission and kind of the status in terms of the technology. So starting in 2025, you have the clean electricity investment and the clean electricity production tax credits. So again, the equivalent of the ITC is section 48E. And again, technology neutral. It replaces the ITC. It's the same calculations in terms of the percentage, 6% base, 30% if you can get the prevailing wage. It has the same bonuses. Again, the technology, so it doesn't explicitly say solar or wind or geothermal. It's basically saying that the anticipated greenhouse gas emissions rate is not greater than 0. So basically a 0 greenhouse gas emission rate that the technology needs to meet. The same new technologies in terms of interconnection, storage, microgrid are there. And essentially this program goes out for at least 10 years. But there is a benchmark of whatever year in the future where the greenhouse gas emissions is 25% of this year's level is when technically the credit will end. So, I mean, I don't know, from a policy or technology perspective, if that 25% is, if that's aggressive or impossible or what, but it seems pretty aggressive to me. And I mean, obviously we want to head that way, but technically the tax credit is going to be available the later of 2032 and whatever year our country has 25% of this year's emissions in terms of greenhouse gas. The production tax credit, very similar again. It's the equivalent of the PTC, but it's technology neutral. There is a program that actually was in existence before, but kind of got re-upped with the it was kind of dormant for a while there, but got reconstituted as the Advanced Energy Manufacturing Production Tax Credit. Essentially, manufacturing facilities can get a 30% credit based on the investment in the facility. There are program caps. There are an application process from the Treasury and the Department of Energy to be able to qualify for these credits or get these credits awarded. Some of the factors that the application is supposed to consider is commercial viability of the technology, the job creation numbers, the impact on greenhouse gas emissions. So, I list here some of the manufacturing technologies that, were listed in the statute: solar, wind, geothermal, storage, CO2 capture, grid-related equipment, energy conservation. So it's fairly broad, and then there's some catch-all language where any other advanced energy property is determined by the secretary. So if there are manufacturing groups, looking to establish facilities, this credit I think would be very much of interest. And there's a $10 billion cap, and so there are designated set-asides. For example, $4 billion to energy communities, which essentially are low-income communities impacted by the closure of kind of fossil fuel facilities. This is a new exciting program, and if you're involved in any of the manufacturing side. 45X also regarding manufacturing. There's a tax credit for essential components, and there are varying amounts depending on what component it is, but it's specifically listed in the statute in terms of components relating to wind, solar, battery components, critical minerals. Production needs to be in the United States. Commercial clean vehicles, so electric or fuel cell vehicles that are commercially based. Here, the maximum credits amount here. It is a tax credit on the incremental cost So there is a base level of cost for, let's say, just a traditional vehicle, and essentially there is a 30% credit if it's a fully electric vehicle, but it's based on the incremental cost differential. Clean fuel production, transportation and aviation fuel. They're very similar to the manufacturing credit, but it's some of the biofuel incentives that it currently exist. So there are some, per gallon production amount. There's some incentives around clean hydrogen and the production of clean hydrogen. That is a new incentive. All right. So I'm going to start to move into some of the structural changes. The biggest of these are the new bonuses. Again, there are increased credits for prevailing wage and apprenticeship, and whether if the components of a project are produced in the United States, as well as if they're located in special energy communities. And then lastly, this environmental justice, which apply to solar and wind. So the bonus being, you have a set level of 30%. You can go above 30% if you meet some of these requirements. So the biggest change, actually, I think one of the biggest changes in the Inflation Reduction Act is this requirement now for a prevailing wage and apprenticeship. So essentially, if your project is larger than a megawatt and starts construction after the guidance comes out in February, 60 days after the guidance comes out in February, you're going to need to meet prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements in order to get the 30% tax credits. So what that means, what the prevailing wage requirement is laborers, mechanics employed by the taxpayer, contractor, or subcontractors who are, essentially constructing the project, or if they're actually also repairing the project within the 5-year tax credit period for ITC, they must be paid prevailing wage. So, that's a Department of Labor standard, and, that is really going to impact every major solar project in the country in terms of the cost. So in exchange for the 30% tax credit, bumping up from 6%, that there's going to be a prevailing wage requirement for the workers who are, the laborers and mechanics who are working on the projects. On the apprenticeship side, and so again, both of these requirements have to be met. Starting in 2024, 15% of the total labor hours performed on the project must be performed by qualified apprentices from a federally registered apprenticeship program. So there are, different job training programs, apprenticeship programs around the country. The project sponsors and everybody involved in the project is going to need to be comfortable that those apprenticeship requirements are met. There is a good faith effort in terms of requesting a request for apprentices from a qualified apprenticeship program. But essentially the standard is 15% of the labor hours have to be performed. And then another requirement, which was surprising as well, was that basically any subcontractor or contractor employing 4 or more people has to at least have 1 apprentice. So again, every sub that's working on a deal, this is going to impact, and there's definitely going to be a lot of kind of record keeping that's going to need to happen. But if you're employing 4 or more people, at least 1 apprentice needs to be employed. Domestic content, you get a 10% bonus if the components are made in the United States, and the components generally it's basically any manufactured product components. The steel and the iron, let's say for like a solar deal or a wind deal, needs to be produced in the United States. And essentially 40% of the manufactured products have to have, basically been manufactured in the United States. So the taxpayer who's going to, claim the credit or qualify for the credit as the owner of the project needs to certify that there's a domestic content. So this is essentially a, supply chain issue, supply chain verification issue. It's going to be very interesting to figure out like how this gets, documented, and what other type of due diligence is going to need to happen in terms of the domestic content. But that is a 10% bonus for domestic content. There's another 10% bonuses for energy communities. I referred to this earlier. So there are 3 types of energy communities. If you are on a brownfield site, you're considered to be an energy community. If you are in a metropolitan statistical area, which was based on a fossil fuel economy and has high unemployment, that is also considered an energy community. And if you are in a census tract or an adjacent census tract to a closed coal mine or electricity plant, that is also considered an energy community. So again, I think the policy here is, as the transition to the clean energy space, if there are low-income areas, high unemployment areas that are impacted by the closure of the fossil fuel projects, that those areas should get preference or additional subsidies to create these clean energy projects. So those that is the energy communities bonus. Lastly, the environmental justice solar or wind bonus. So if you are in a low income community, and then again, this is a census tract, a new market census tract designation, or if you're on Indian land, you are in a low income community, and then you get a 10% bonus. If you are in a qualified low income residential building, so if you do a solar project on affordable housing or some other low income economic benefit project that benefits low income households, you get a plus 20% bonus in your investment tax credits. And so this program, again, the regs are going to shed some, hopefully you're going to shed some light on this, but it is a application procedure. There is some designation. There is a 1.8 gigawatt limit per year in terms of accessing these bonuses. And so, we'll see how these, these get awarded and what the procedure is for applying to get these. But again, very substantial increases. So if you are in, let's say, if you're building on a low-income housing project, let's say you start at 30% tax credit, you can possibly get up to 50% tax credit if you qualify for and get awarded a environmental justice bonus here. Great. So I'm almost at the end, and then I could take some question. A couple more structural changes, which are really important. So I mentioned earlier, but I think the prevailing wage and the apprenticeship requirement is probably the biggest change in the Inflation Reduction Act. Probably the second biggest, or maybe some people would say that this is the biggest, actually, is these 2 elections. There's now an election, the 6417 and 6418 are 2 elections that essentially a taxpayer that is the owner of the project can now transfer a tax credit to another entity just through an election, as opposed to having to create a large structure tax partnership to include a tax investor, either like a bank or insurance company to buy the tax credits. So this first election is for tax exempt organizations. So nonprofits, governments, tribes, any organization exempt from income tax, they essentially can get, instead of having to transfer it, they can get a cash refund of the amount of the credits. Again, so they do not have to have a partner and a partner with tax appetite to be able to invest in the credit. They can now make this election, get a subsequent refund, and be able to monetize the tax credit that way. So I think that's a huge benefit for the nonprofits, and especially groups that have solar projects but aren't, very large solar projects where the cost and complication of the tax credits structure might not really be worth it. So I think that would be something to look at. And this other election is for-profits, basically any other entity that's not a nonprofit. The taxpayer can transfer all of the credits for cash to an unrelated taxpayer. Again, so you don't need to create a partnership flip structure, or have to admit a for-profit partner. There is essentially now an election where you can just transfer it to another taxpayer. So that also gives a lot of flexibility. I think there needs to be some consideration about the timing and such. But I think those two elections give a lot of opportunity, and I think we'll see a lot of creativity in kind of how this could work with various scenarios and different project sponsors and investors. So I think I'll stop there and hand it back to Michael.
Great. Thank you. That was a wealth of information. Oh, I am sorry. Oh, no, I'm not. Can you hear me, Jerome?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So questions. Oh, there's one in the chat. Okay, when convenient, can you elaborate on what is meant by prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements? I think
He did already.
Yep, we got to that.
Yeah, just to know, I mean, that again, that's obviously tied to your area.
Yeah.
It's Department of Labor, federal standard. I think that's going to be a challenge in some areas. In other areas where just the market is already prevailing wage, it's not going to be an issue. But I think that's going to, it's going to be an important piece to consider as you're building the financial pro forma, figuring out the cost. But my sense is that most projects are going to need to get there, right? Because you're not going to do a deal at 6%.
Yes, I agree. I think that it's going to be. I mean, the large solar installers are already ahead of this. I mean, they're working on getting apprenticeship programs certified as we speak. I think for this audience too, it's important to understand just how big a megawatt is. In terms of that threshold for solar. I mean, so that's like 5 acres of solar. And so, for a typical rooftop installation, this isn't going to be required. But for like a large ground mounted solar array, this is something that will be part of every project. For sure. Other questions?
And it also applies to some of the energy efficiency incentives as
well.
well.
That's right. Yeah. The efficiency programs are something that we can help with. So our Build It Green program, is working on this in terms of energy efficiency and weatherization. So if you want to go after these credits, come talk to me, and we can try to figure this out. IBEW will also probably have a certified apprenticeship program here in town for those projects. So this shouldn't be difficult to get to. You have a question?
Yeah, for the tax credit that has to do with affordable housing, is that pro rata for the units that are qualified?
That's a good question. So Jerome, for a mixed income project where some of the units are affordable, like 20%, and the other ones are not, is that tax credit prorated for just those units?
And is it affordable or lower income?
And what is the definition of affordable?
Yeah. So the definition of affordable essentially is that there's some federal, and I think they maybe even define state in terms of a state affordable housing. So there needs to be some type of subsidy, a government subsidy that is specific to having a low income a household. And
so for us, this is probably 80% AMI. I would guess.
But the mixed income question, I don't know. I think that's a good question because my guess is that if it was a mix, that the bonus would just apply to just the whole solar project. I don't think there would be a distinction because, if the building is, somehow subsidized, and meet that qualification, I'm not sure that they would necessarily kind of divide that or prorate that. But again, there is a application procedure for that bonus. So I think there's also an opening for Treasury or whoever is administering this program to design it however they
Yeah.
want. So
Yeah.
they might say,
TBD.
oh, if it's only 50% affordable, then we'll do 50%. I think that's possible. We just don't know.
And so there's also the efficiency tax credits that had the bonus for affordability, and I presume that is in the same TBD category as the solar. Is that fair?
Yes. Yes, I think it depends on which one it is, but yeah, I think that, I think in February, hopefully we're gonna have a lot more answers and be able to move it. I mean, I know a lot of projects are just kind of waiting and seeing in terms of just to make sure that they're understanding correctly, how this is gonna work, but yeah, hopefully in February, get a lot more.
I have a quick question. By show of hands in this room, and here I'll turn. But just so who has used a 179D tax credit on a commercial project that you're aware of? Let's see, 3, 4 hands. Okay. So there's some experience with that already in the market. Has anybody used any of the high performance residential tax credits? Okay, 1 hand. Of the people in this room, I mean, who I would say ostensibly plans on using something from this presentation in terms of in the future of this, I see something in here that I'll be able to use. That's everybody almost. Okay.
One more question.
Yeah.
With the commercial vehicles, is there a gross tonnage that the commercial that defines commercial vehicle? Or
Did you hear that,
like
Jerome?
if a professional business per se buys a vehicle that that is-
Yeah, I think there's both. I mean, there is both. So there's a distinction in terms of how much credits. It looks like it's 14,000 pounds. In terms of the maximum credit amount, but in terms of having it be a commercial vehicle, there is, a distinction in terms of having it be used in a trade or business, just in terms of, I do think nonprofits can also use that. So again, depending on kind of what the use is, but this is just generally, commercial clean vehicles in terms of not personal property.
Other questions? Yep.
Is Jerome willing to share by link there?
Yeah.
The presentation.
Jerome, can we share the presentation, the slides?
Yeah. Certainly. I'm just gonna put back to my cover slide here that my email is there. And then I also I'll email Michael the PDF, and so you can get it from him. But yeah, feel free to reach out to me, and then again, reach out to Michael if you want the slides.
You?
For those of us who got into solar, let's say 15 years ago, we may have deteriorating roofs underneath them, and we're getting ready to disassemble,
Yeah.
replace the roof, reassemble, and that number is large.
Oh, that's a great question. Yes. Okay, that's where you're going.
Do
Yeah.
any of these apply to a reinstallation of an existing
Yeah.
solar system?
I don't know how much of that you heard, Jerome.
If you want
Yeah.
to wouldn't reassemble. It's
Yeah.
very expensive.
And the existing equipment and the panels are just going to get reinstalled, not
Yeah.
new panels.
Taken down, re-roofed, and
Yeah.
then reinstalled.
Yeah. So I mean, I think generally you're not going to get new solar tax credits on equipment that's already been placed in service. I think there may be an opportunity, again, depending on kind of how you define the project. I mean, there's always a question about
Label.
whether the roof costs
Labor
are
knowledge,
included.
more than the original installation.
You could sell the panels to the contractor and then buy them back.
Yeah, I might.
Just saying. Is there, could,
I think
Is there
somebody
anything-
should have somebody take a look at that in terms of, whether that's gonna be placed in
you
service.
should
I
call
mean,
Jerome before you do that.
We're just living
but I
with
mean, I think there's gonna be a whole wave of, new installations or upgrades. I mean, I think there might be a way to kind of figure out a way to do it. I guess, again, it has to be very fact-specific analysis, but, I think there is gonna be a new wave of interest now that you have these new credits.
Other questions? Those are good.
I have a question from remote,
Oh,
if I can.
yep, go for it.
Sure. I put it in the chat here as well. I thought at one point I read about some provisions for lower income homeowners, that the energy efficiency to the home, those improvements could get up to 50% and maybe even some funds earlier than just at the end of the year, which would be important for a lower income family. And the second was, I thought that there was some kind of additional bonus that was available for anyone if the total project brought consumption down to a certain level. Was I misreading all of that, or?
So, I mean, I think that there probably could be some of these provisions that could be read that way or described that way, but, in terms of the low income households, the Inflation Reduction Act also had a whole bunch of tax related funding, pools created and allocation.
Yeah.
So
There was
that
a whole, there was a state rebate program. Yeah, you're exactly right, Jerome. So it was not a tax incentive. It's something that the states will administer with the pool of funding. Yeah,
So that may be completely dependent on how say the state of Tennessee reads that or
Yes.
implements it.
yeah, that'll go through TDEC more than likely. And they will set up a rebate program for the state of Tennessee that people will apply for, but that has not been done yet.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an important point. I mean, there's a whole other pot of money that's not tax related that everybody should pay attention to. I mean, especially I know that there's an emphasis on investing in lower income communities and supporting low income households. So on the non-tax side, there's going to be a lot of potential funding available.
Great. Well, I don't have any further questions here. Jerome, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. Really appreciate it, and we'll be in touch.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks, everybody.
If anybody has any questions about any of these efficiency related or renewable energy related tax credits, please reach out to Jerome. But also, if you have multifamily project or affordable housing projects like with churches or other sort of complicated partnerships like that, Jerome has a lot of experience in that space, and highly recommend using him as a resource. So thanks everybody for coming out, and we'll see you at Green Drinks.
Thank you.